used to holding the microphones, so bear with me. Hi, how's everybody doing today? My name is Joshua Elkins, as she said earlier just a minute ago, and I'm 34 years old. I live in Hopkinsville. I work in a factory at a Braceway. I'm married to Amanda back there. I have 4 beautiful children and a loving family who all came to support me tonight, and I appreciate that. It's an honor to be here to give my testimony and just share what God's done for me in my life, and to also share what an impact a person can have on somebody's life and how I can change things. But so when I was growing up, I didn't really go to church regularly. My mom always made me go to vacation Bible schools, like in the local neighborhood and area and things like that, because she knew that that was the right thing to do. And it kind of instilled some things in me that I could look back on whenever certain hard times happen. And my father passed away when I was 11, and I think that that might have started a lot of the depression and anxiety and excuses that I had to not interact with people and kind of like close myself off from the world kind of thing. And then when I was 16 years old, I discovered marijuana. I enjoyed it very much. And by the time I was 21, I was addicted to opioids and alcohol, and I was just a complete wreck alcoholic. I've been arrested and been in jail more than 10 times, but less than 20. I can't really tell you the exact number. I've been kicked out of all of, or chose to leave, out of all the houses that my family allowed me to come stay in, trying to help me, or friends and relatives or anybody that would say, you know, you can stay with us, but you can't do this or that. And I would always do this or that and get kicked out or have to leave. And I was just a complete wreck. I refused to change for anybody. I didn't think I could change, and I thought that I deserved everything that was happening to me in the situation I was in. I thought it was my fault, and well, maybe it was, but I thought I deserved it, you know. And then the last time that I got arrested, I didn't feel like living anymore, and I was too scared to commit suicide. I know that might sound funny, or not funny, but weird, but I was too afraid to do it. So what I wanted to do was I was going to rob a store, and then hopefully that I would get shot when I robbed the store, and that would be the end of it. I wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. And but I didn't get shot. I got arrested, and thankfully. And while I was in jail, that's where Steve Bourne came to visit me. My mother reached out to him and Gerald Johnson, and he just told him I was hurting, and then she didn't know what else to do, pretty much. And Steve started coming to talk to me. He went and seen me about twice a week for a long time, and I guess he could kind of tell that it really wasn't going very far. I was just kind of talking to him and just using it as an excuse to get out of my cell. And so Steve, one day, he told me, he was like, well, Josh, he goes, I want you to do something, and I want you to pray to God and ask him to show you something. And if he doesn't show you anything, if nothing happens, then I'll leave you alone about it, and every time I come and visit you, we'll talk about football, we'll talk about basketball, whatever you want to talk about, anything, fishing, whatever. And I said, okay, that's fine. And I went back to my cell that night, and I prayed to God. I asked God to show me something. It was very sarcastic. I remember I had a Bible. It was like a paperback Bible that they give you in jail. And I prayed to God, and I didn't really know how to pray. And I just said, God, if you're real, show me something. That's how I prayed. And I took that Bible that I had, and because I thought I knew everything, and because of God was really so real, and he was really so powerful, it didn't really matter what I read. So I took the Bible, I closed my eyes, and I just started flipping through the pages, and I stuck my finger down. And when I stuck my finger down, I landed on Acts chapter 2. And so I started to read. It was Acts chapter 2, verse 17 is where my finger landed on. And it said, in the last days, God says, I will pour out my spirit upon all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy, and your young men will see visions, and your old men will dream dreams. And then I read the verse after that, 18, which says, in those days I will pour out my spirit even on my servants, men and women alike, and they will prophesy. And the next verse was very weird, and I didn't really understand it. To me at the time, it was very weird. I didn't really understand it, so I skipped a few and went to verse 21, and it said, "But everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved." And I thought that was kind of weird. Honestly, I was like, that's just coincidence that it's something like Steve's been talking to me about, whatever. So I was like, the whole book probably says the same thing. So I just closed it up. And there was something interesting on TV that night in the jail cell. They do have TVs in there, some of them. And so I decided to watch that, and that was more important than reading the Bible. And it was 3 verses, and if God is almighty, I don't need to read more than 3 verses. He can work with that. So I was watching TV, and a guard came by the hallway, walking down the aisles, and he knocked on the glass and was like, "Does anybody want to go to church? Get ready for church. Suit up, lace up, whatever they want to call it, and say, get ready for church." And it was odd because it wasn't the normal church night. It was off. It was like off night. And but I thought it would be another reason to get out of my cell and whatever. So I got ready to go to church. And actually, if I want to be honest about it, I did think in my mind, if God's going to show me something, maybe he'll show me here. And I got ready, and I went to church. And when I got there, and we'll call it church, but a little room with all us guys in it. When we got there, the preacher wasn't there. He hadn't shown up yet. And we waited, and about 10 or 20 minutes, 10, 15 minutes went by, and the guard came in, and he says, "I don't know where the preacher's at right now. He should be on his way. This is an odd day. Maybe he's late, whatever." We waited another 10 or 15 more minutes, and they were getting us ready to take us back to our cells. And I remember thinking to myself, great job, God. If you're real, this is some way to show me something, And about that time, the preacher walked in. And he was a preacher at Calvary in Hopkinsville at the time. I don't remember his name off the top of my head. That's horrible. But he said, "Sorry, guys. Sorry I'm late. I was at a hospital visiting somebody. And when I got out of my truck to come in here, it said a paper fell out of my Bible, and something told me that I needed to preach on this. It's an old message that I gave a long time ago." And I thought to myself, yeah, how convenient. You're running late. You forgot you had to be here. Of course, you're going to preach a message from a long time ago. You didn't know you had to prepare anything. That's how I thought at the time. And he said, if any of you have your Bibles with you, open to Acts chapter 2. And I was like, okay. And I started feeling a very odd feeling. That to me at the time, it was very odd. I had chills all over my body. I was shaking similar to the way I'm shaking now. And I was very nervous. I felt scared. And then when he says, all right, we're going to go to Acts chapter 2, verse 17. And I was like, okay, that's just one verse. That's just one verse. And I was very nervous. But he read verse 17. He read verse 18. And then he stopped. And he preached for a little while, not reading the Bible. And then he skipped the verses in between and went to verse 21. And he only preached on those 3 verses. And that's it. Nothing else. And he asked that day if anybody would like to give their life to Christ. He had us all bow our heads and close our eyes and say, if anybody would like to give your life to Christ, just raise your hand. Somebody will come and pray for you. And my hand went up really quick because I felt ashamed. I felt guilty. I felt like, what have I been doing? Like everything that I thought I knew, I didn't, And after I got out of jail, after all that had happened, Steve was there waiting on me to help disciple me. He did. I worked for him for 3 years at Crossroads Construction. And he taught me what it meant to be a Christian man. And then after I worked for him for 3 years, you would think that everything that happened to me that was so profound when I was in jail, that would have just completely changed me, right? That I would just never turn back to my old ways or anything, right? But that wasn't the case. After I had worked for Steve for 3 years, I got married to my wife, and I started working inside a factory, and started having a lot of back pains and stuff again. And I'd use that for an excuse to get pain pills again. Started taking pain pills again, even after all that stuff had happened to me. I still was going to church. I was living a lie, basically, taking those pain pills and going to church and talking to Steve and all that stuff and not telling anybody. The only person that really knew was my wife, and I was lying to her the whole time, denying it. And then And then she made me go to a Suboxone clinic. I don't know if anybody knows what that is here. I went to a Suboxone clinic, and I did stop taking opioids, but I was taking Suboxone. And then during the time that I was taking Suboxone, I decided that it would be okay if I just had a beer every once in a while. Just being honest with you. So I started drinking beer again, and then that turned into hard liquor again. And then I became an alcoholic again. That was on Suboxone. Even though I then had a godly experience, and he just completely thought that he had changed my life forever, right? I chose not to follow that path again, even though I was lying to myself and I was just completely blind to it. I thought I was doing okay. That's what I told people, but I wasn't. And during the time that I was drinking heavily, lots of alcohol, my mother and my stepfather came over to my house, and I was completely drunk. I don't even remember any of this. I was blacked out, I guess, whatever, but I was still up, walking around, like a shell of yourself. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that. And my stepdad told me, because I was going to drive to go somewhere, he told me, no, you can't drive, give me your keys. And of course that made me very angry. And I guess I tackled him, got on top of him, started choking him or something, and my son actually said something about, Dad, stop. And that's what kind of snapped me out of it. And I went somewhere and passed out, I guess. I don't really remember exactly what happened other than what they told me. But when I woke up, my wife told me everything that happened, and I was so ashamed because I had never been a violent person whenever I drank. I never really was violent. And for me to completely lose that control and do that to somebody that I love my stepdad. I'd never do something like that to him, but I did. It just completely took control over me, and it scared me very badly. And then so I just got angry at the alcohol, started praying about it, and I haven't drank since. But then I decided that it would be okay to start smoking weed again. So because of everything that was going on in the news, and I'm just making excuses. These were my excuses that I went through. Everything's going on in the news. It's being legal here. It's becoming legal there. Doctors say it's good for you. It's not bad for you. I'm going to start smoking again. And I actually, because I can be a little silver-tongued at times, convinced my wife that it would be okay. And because of everything that she has been through with me, she probably was just like, whatever, just do whatever. And so after I started smoking again, I got really sick. I started throwing up every morning like I was pregnant. Every single morning I would wake, seriously, every morning when I got up to go to work at 4 o'clock in the morning, I would go to the bathroom and I would vomit like crazy, like bad. Sometimes it was so bad, not trying to be disgusting, but it would come out of both ends, and I'd have to get in the shower just so I could do that every morning before I went to work. This happened for 5-6 months. It was bad. And I went to doctors, went to gastro doctors to find out what was wrong with me. They never found anything. They checked my everything, my gallbladder, all that stuff, trying to find out what was wrong. And they never could find anything wrong. And then one time I went to the doctor and they did a drug test while I was there. And it showed that the only thing I had in my system was THC. And she said, how heavily do you smoke? And this and that, asked me some questions. And she said, have you ever heard of cannabinoid-induced cycle vomiting? And I was like, no. She was like, well, that's what you got. And it's very rare. It's almost as rare as getting struck by lightning. But I believe that's what you have, and the only real way to figure that out is for you to stop smoking. And, when it starts to get out of your system, you won't be sick anymore. And during that visit to the doctor, they put me in a CAT scan thing, because she said it could be one of two things. It could be the marijuana cycling, whatever, vomiting, and it could be I could have a tumor or mass in my brain that was causing cycle vomiting too. That's basically the only two things that would make somebody throw up at the same time every day in the morning. So that scared me really bad, because I'd been smoking pretty much my whole life, and I never got sick from doing it, right? So I thought for sure I had a tumor in my brain, and I didn't have a tumor in my brain. There wasn't nothing up there, but I could have told them that, But while I was in the machine sitting there, something really weird happened to me. See, when I was growing up and living with my grandmother and my grandfather, because I'd been kicked out of my mother's home, I was staying there, and I would get drunk, really drunk at night, and it would be hard for them to wake me up in the mornings. So my grandmother, being the nice, soft-spoken woman that she is, she would come in there, Josh, wake up. It wouldn't wake me up. So it would make my grandfather very angry, and he would come in there and he would smack me on the bottom of my feet or flop my toes or twist my toe, and if that didn't wake me up, he would like hit me with a cattle prod on the bottom of my feet. He was a farmer. And while I was in that thing, whatever scans your head, I was laying there, and I just felt something just thump me, just hard as can be on my big toe, just hard. And I was like, I thought it was a cord or part of the machines or something that was in there, and I was like, what in the world? And I kind of looked, and they were like, please don't move. I was like, okay. So I couldn't look at it, and then it flumped me again. It flumped me 3 times. I say flump because I feel like I know what it was. But it hit me on my toe 3 different times very hard. And I know y'all probably think that's crazy, but whenever I got out of there and they let me move, I looked down and there was nothing in the room that could have hit my foot at all. So it started making me think that maybe that the doctor was right, and maybe it was cannabinoid-induced cycle vomiting, and this was like my wake-up call, that it was like God telling me to wake up, or my grandfather telling me to wake up, and that was the only way that it was really going to get my attention. And I started thinking about that and decided, okay, I'll give it a try. I'll quit smoking. And 2 weeks later, I wasn't sick anymore. So, and then more recently, I lost my best friend and my mentor, Steve. And this is honestly the first time in my life that I've had to cope with something while being completely sober. Besides when I lost my dad when I was 11. And but it's also the first time that I've truly leaned on God and trusted Him to comfort me and to give me peace. And I can tell you, even though this is one of the hardest things that has happened to me, it's also been like, I don't want to say one of the easiest, but it's been so much better than any alcohol that I could have drank to drown it away, or any pills or anything that I could have took to numb it. It's been so much easier. And there's a few things that I wanted to read. The definition of surrender. It means that a believer, in Christian surrender, says the believer means that a believer completely gives up his own will and subjects his or her thoughts and ideas and deeds to the will of the teachings of God. Surrender is a willful acceptance and a yielding to a dominating force in their will. They become your master. And whenever I read that, I thought of Luke 16:13, where it says, no one can serve 2 masters, for you will hate one and love the other. You will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God, and the Bible verse says money, but you can replace that with any of those things. You cannot serve God in alcohol. You cannot serve God in drugs. You cannot serve God in depression. You cannot serve God in anxiety. And until a person completely decides to submit themselves to God, they're going to, especially myself, I was haunted by my past and my addictions, and it taught me a valuable lesson because of the way that Steve treated me and the way that other people in my life have treated me, especially my wife too, and my mom. I don't want to not mention her, she'll be mad at me. But you can't give up on yourself. You can't give up on other people, because look how many times that I backslid over and over and over again. And you have to trust in God, and you have to surrender. And I just wanted to include all that in my testimony, because if I had just stopped at jail and stopped at the Bible verse, then y'all wouldn't really know. They would just say, okay, as soon as you say, God, I'm ready, take me, then everything's going to get better and everything's going to be okay. And that wasn't the case for me. It was hard. But now it took all that for me to finally learn that just lean on God and it will be okay, even though bad things happen. And I've never done a formal altar call before, just being honest with you. But I know how to pray. I know people here that know how to pray. And if you're tired of just doing the same old thing over and over again, if you're ready to surrender to God, if this is the time that you decide that you want to do that, I would love to pray for you. It would be an honor to pray for you right now. And I'm living proof that don't wait too long and don't be stupid. Just surrender. Because I was completely out of my mind for not doing this sooner. And that's pretty much all I have to say.
Everybody would, if you would, please stand this time.